Do not buy the Shure SM7B in 2023. And you know it's true because it rhymes. Now you're probably saying, dude, why are you telling me not to buy the SM7B when you're literally using one right now? You're just trying to keep me away from the awesomeness that is the pinnacle of podcasting microphones, the Shure SM7B. That's not it, that's not why at all, folks. The reason why I don't think you should buy the SM7B is because it's a better option now. And I'm not even talking about personal preferences. Some people have preferences for microphones. For example, I kind of like the sound of the Rode Broadcaster a little bit more than the SM7B, but that's not what I'm talking about here. Although I prefer the form of the SM7B over basically every microphone, but there are some condenser mics that might sound better than the SM7B in my opinion. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is there is another SM7 out there. There's a better SM7 out there. So instead of buying the SM7B, what you should buy is the SM7DB. That's right, folks. Shure is back with a brand new microphone, the SM7DB. And it's the exact same thing as the Shure SM7B, except now it has a built-in preamp. Now, why is that important? Well, because the SM7B is a notoriously deaf or quiet microphone. If you're going to use it for voice like this, you require a minimum of 60 dB of gain. Now, that's a lot of gain. Now, obviously, if you're recording a guitar cabinet or a kick drum, you don't need that much gain. But 60 dB of gain is a lot, and most audio interfaces don't have that. So this microphone has the inline preamp built in to give you that extra up to 28 dB of gain, all within a single package, which means you don't have to purchase a cloudlifter separately now, right? It's all built in to a single microphone. You also have some really cool options on the rear here. Not only can you bypass the preamp, you can also change the gain of the preamp to either plus 18 or plus 28 dB. And you don't have that with your cloudlifters. I'm using a Coda Stealth, which is a cloudlifter type device. So I have two things here. I have the mic, and then I had to purchase an inline preamp. With the SM7DB, even though it does cost $100 more, that is built into the mic. So now you don't have two pieces to mess around with. You have a single unit that you can, hook up. You only need one mic cable instead of, if you're using like a cloudlifter, you're going to need two mic cables, two XLR cables, in order to hook that up. So this is what you should go for if you're going to purchase an SM7B for voice. Okay. Again, if you want to buy the standard SM7B for your kick drum or something, go right ahead. Even though I still think you should buy the SM7DB. Yes, it is $100 more, but a cloudlifter is $100, right? An extra XLR cable that's any good is an extra $20 or so. Maybe you can get one for 10. So overall, this is a much better option. Let me just go over what generally happens to people when they, get into the SM7B, when they first buy their SM7B. So what usually happens is somebody says, I'm going to start a podcast or a YouTube channel or something, and they don't really know anything about audio. So they sort of look around, they sort of look at what they know. So, oh, hey, look, Joe Rogan uses an SM7B, right? He has $100 million. I would like $100 million. So I'm gonna buy the same mic that he has. And there's some sense to that. People who see, people watching your podcast or your YouTube video, when they see that you have an SM7B, because they are also exposed to the look of the SM7B in their favorite podcasts, they immediately give you a little more credence than if you're, strolling in with like a PG-58 or something like that. You know what I mean? They're immediately going to go, oh, wow, this person must know what they're talking about. They have the same mic I saw on, Joe Rogan or some other random podcast. They buy the microphone, they buy an audio interface, they just sort of Google things. They don't really know what they're looking for, but they just get something, right? They hook it up, they hook up their mic, they're so excited, I'm going to record my first podcast today. Yeah! And they start talking and they record a little bit and they realize that, oh, wow, this is incredibly low, right? The level is so low, I can barely hear myself. And the next thing they do is go to some online forum and start asking questions. Hey, I think I got a lemon SM7B. Should I send it back? Or maybe something's wrong with my audio interface. Should I send that back? somebody will answer the question and they'll say, what interface do you have? And inevitably it'll be some lower end $200 or less interface, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. We'll look up the specs of that one and we'll be like, hey, you don't have enough gain to drive that microphone. Okay. Because what people don't understand about audio interfaces is most of them don't have a legit 60 dB of gain. And even the ones that do, like I have the ID44 here, which does have a legit 60 dB of gain. Even though that's sort of the minimum for the SM7B, you're a lot better off with 65 or 70, 75 dB of gain. And that's simply because you don't want to turn your gain all the way up, because what generally happens is you start to introduce some preamp noise when you drive your preamps too hard. So again, having 70 dB of gain is what I really call the minimum needed. And the vast majority of audio interfaces simply do not have a legit 70 dB of gain. Now, some people, they'll look this up and they'll find out, or they'll figure out that how much gain they need. And they'll buy an interface that says, I have a Presonus 1824C, for example, and it has an 80 dB gain range. You go, whoa, I'll just get one of those, right? I'll just get me an 1824C, which is a great interface, by the way. But then you'll get it, you'll plug in your microphone and you'll go, oh, it doesn't actually go up to plus 80. It actually only goes up to plus 65. And you say, what? I thought it had an 80 dB gain range. Well, it does. It goes to plus 65, but it also goes to minus 15, right? And a lot of people, when they're dealing with audio interfaces, they don't understand that preamps can not just turn things up, but they can turn things down, right? So they'll buy an audio interface that says something like, has a strong 58 dB gain range. And you think, okay, 58 dB, that's 2 dB off what is suggested for the SM7B, no big deal. Except you get the audio interface, you plug in your SM7B, and you try to record, and it's this thin little line in your DAW. And the reason is because the interface you purchased doesn't have 58 dB of gain, it has a 58 dB gain range, which means, in this case, and a lot of cases out there, it actually has plus 50 dB of gain and minus 8 dB of minus gain. So that's a 50, 58, that's a 58 dB gain range, but it's only plus 50 and minus 8. So whenever you're looking for your audio interfaces, folks, and you see some huge gain range, right? Don't assume that means plus. Don't assume that means, it has 75 dB of actual usable gain. A range can mean minus and plus, okay? So again, what generally happens is, you tell them this, you tell them, hey, your interface simply doesn't have the juice to run this mic the way you need to run it. And, then they'll be like, I spent all my money on this. Now what do? I can't afford another interface, et cetera, et cetera. So then you go, no, it's no big deal. You just need to buy a cloudlifter, right? Just buy a cloudlifter and you're good. And they say, okay, how much is that? Well, it's like $100 or so. There's the cloudlifter brand. There's cloudlifter type devices. Like I said, I use a Coda Stealth, which plugs directly into the mic, which I like because that means I only need a single cable. But this is what people generally go through when they first start getting into the SM7B and into audio and not understanding everything that's, needed to actually run this equipment properly. So they'll order their cloudlifter. It's going to be $100 and however much dollars. They'll get it. They'll plug the microphone into it, and then they'll realize, oh crap, I need another cable, right? Because you have to have 2 cables to use a cloudlifter. Whereas with the Coda Stealth, you only need a single cable, or with like the FET head and other things like that, you only need the single cable. So then they have to order another cable and wait a couple more days for that to be delivered. And then finally they get everything hooked up. After all this struggle, all this extra money they didn't realize they're going to have to spend, they finally get everything hooked up, and now they can start their podcast or YouTube video or whatever they want to do, right? I want you to avoid all of that, folks. I don't want you to go through any of that trouble. I don't want you to go through the trouble of separate devices and different things and extra cables. It's just too much of a hassle, right? And also with a cloudlifter or Coda Stealth or whatever, I don't have the option to turn down the extra gain that it gives me, So your cloudlifter is going to give you around plus 25 dB of extra gain that your mic can use. As I said up top, one of the cool things about the SM7B is that you can choose the amount of boost. You can also bypass that built-in preamp, right? So if you just want to use the mic, just like this mic here, turn the preamp off, fine. It'll be a SM7B in every single way, right? But turn on the built-in preamp. Now, not only do you not need any external cloud lifters or anything like that, you have an option for plus 18 or plus 28. Now, why this is so cool is because some preamps have a sound to them. I mean, sometimes it's bad, but sometimes it's good, right? So sometimes you have preamps, like I'm using the Audient ID44 Mark II here, and the preamps in this sound absolutely amazing. They are super juicy and just have a great sound to them. So in my case, since I like the sound of the preamps, I might want to use plus 18 because that's going to give me the extra juice that I need, but it's not going to give me too much, right? So if I go with plus 18, I can then drive my preamps, the preamps in the ID44, just a little bit harder, and I'll get more of the tone and the sound of those preamps that I really enjoy, versus maybe I have an interface that, maybe I have an interface that only has 50 dB of gain. Well, if I use plus 18 on there, I mean, that I guess that would work, but I would have to also drive my preamps pretty hard, and maybe I don't like the sound of those preamps, right? So in that case, I could go to plus 28. That gives me tons of headroom, right? Tons of extra usable gain, so I don't have to drive my preamps as hard, and I also get a cleaner sound. Sometimes you have preamps that are kind of woolly. So that's where the plus 28 or the plus 18 come into play, is that you can shape your sound with this microphone much more than you can with an SM7B and a cloud lifter. Choose to drive your own preamps harder and get more of the sound of those preamps, or go to plus 28, drive your preamps lower and have a cleaner, more overall sterile sound. I don't want to say completely sterile because you still have the SM7B obviously in the chain, but the sound of your preamps won't be coloring that sound, which can be a huge bonus in a lot of cases. And also the switches on the back, not just the preamp switches, but the switches for either flat or the low cut or the presence boost, those are easier to adjust, right? For the actual SM7B, you have to use like a screwdriver to get in there and to move that around. For these, it looks like you can actually just kind of flip the switch. So everything about this microphone is better. Even if you're going to record very loud sources, I would still spend the extra $100 for this mic and just bypass the preamp. And then whenever you need the preamp, hey, you don't have to order a cloud lifter or a cloud lifter type device in order to use it for your podcast or for somebody who sings very quiet. It's a big thing today for people to whisper when they sing. I'm going to whisper. It's like, speak up. I'm using an SM7B here. I don't have time for you to whisper into my SM7B. No one's going to hear you. Okay. So, unless you have, a cloud lifter or something, right? So again, do not buy the SM7B in 2023 or beyond. Just save yourself the time, spend the extra $100 up front, and save yourself the trouble with the SM7B. That's the microphone to get. Again, links in the description below.